My mom always said my sister was the smart one, and I'd never amount to anything. She used my college fund to buy my sister a house and told me to be realistic. 7 years later, I invited both of them to a party at the penthouse I owned, overlooking the company I built from scratch. I, 29M, grew up in one of those households where the favoritism wasn't even subtle. It was loud. It was dinner table conversation. It was every single family gathering where my mom would put her arm around my sister and tell whoever was listening that this one right here, she's the smart one, she's going places. And then she'd look at me. Not with cruelty exactly, more like pity. Like I was some stray dog she'd agreed to feed, but never really wanted. My sister is 2 years older. She was valedictorian. She got a full ride to a state school, switched to a private university because she wanted a better network, and my mom covered every penny of the difference without blinking. Meanwhile, I was pulling B's and C's, not because I was stupid, but because nobody in that house ever once asked me what I was interested in. Nobody sat with me, nobody checked my homework, nobody cared. When I was 16, I found something that lit me up: computers. Not just using them, but building things with them. I taught myself to code from free YouTube tutorials and pirated textbooks. I stayed up until 3 a.m. most nights, building little apps, ugly websites, broken scripts that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. I wasn't a genius. I was just obsessed. My mom never once looked at my screen and asked what I was making. Senior year came, and I had a plan. I wasn't going to an Ivy. I knew that. But there was a solid state university with a strong computer science program, and the tuition was manageable. Especially because my dad, before he passed when I was 12, had set up college funds for both me and my sister. Around $40,000 each. Not life-changing money, but enough to get me through 2 years without drowning in debt. I'll never forget the conversation. It was March of my senior year. I sat my mom down and told her I'd been accepted, told her about the program, told her I was excited. I actually used that word, excited. She explained, calmly, like she was reading off a grocery list, that she had used my college fund to help my sister with a down payment on a house. My sister had just graduated, gotten a job in the city, and found a place she loved. She needed help. And mom decided that my $40,000 would cover it. I asked her why she didn't use my sister's own fund, and she said that was already gone, spent on the tuition difference for the private school. So both funds, both of them, gone, all on my sister. I just sat there. I remember the kitchen smelled like garlic because she'd been cooking. I remember the fridge was humming. I remember thinking this is what it feels like to be erased. She told me to be realistic. She said college wasn't for everyone. She said I should look into trade programs or maybe get a job at the hardware store where my uncle worked. She said my sister had the brains, and there was no shame in being the one who worked with his hands. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood up, walked to my room, and started packing. I moved out 3 weeks after graduation, took a duffel bag and a laptop that was held together with tape and hope. No goodbye dinner, no tearful send-off. My mom was at my sister's college orientation that weekend. My sister didn't even know I was leaving. I left the house key on the kitchen counter and walked to the bus stop. I crashed on a friend's couch for 2 months, showering at odd hours so I wouldn't be in the way, eating whatever was cheapest at the gas station down the street. Then, I got a job at a call center doing tech support. It was miserable. 12-hour shifts, angry customers screaming about routers they'd never bothered to restart, a supervisor who called me kid and meant it as an insult. My feet hurt from standing at a shared desk. My ears rang every night from the headset. But here's the thing. Every single night after those shifts, when normal people my age were out living their lives, I sat on that borrowed couch and coded. I built things. Ugly, broken things. Things that crashed. Things that worked once and never again. I failed and rebuilt. I Googled error messages at 2 a.m. until my eyes burned. I freelanced on the side, first for $20 a project, logos for small businesses, basic websites for local restaurants. Then $200. I saved every spare penny. I didn't go out. I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't date. I didn't do anything except work and build. My friend once told me he was worried about me, that I was running on fumes and anger. He wasn't wrong. But fumes and anger were all I had, and I wasn't going to waste them. By the time I was 21, I had a small client base. I built a tool that automated a specific workflow that a lot of mid-sized companies were struggling with. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't an app that went viral. It was boring, ugly, back-end software that saved companies about 15 hours a week in manual data processing. Nobody talks about boring software, but boring software pays. I registered the company out of a studio apartment that smelled like instant noodles. I had no investors, no co-founder, no mentor, Stack Overflow, and a level of spite that could power a small city. The first year was brutal. I almost went under twice. I ate rice and eggs for months. I had one client who ghosted me on a $10,000 invoice. And I literally sat on the floor of my apartment and stared at the wall for an hour before getting back up and sending out 10 more cold emails. I had another client try to sue me because he didn't understand what the software did and thought I'd scammed him. That cost me $3,000 in legal fees I didn't have. I put it on a credit card and didn't sleep for a week. There were nights I almost called my mom. Not because I missed her, but because when you're broke and terrified and alone at 22, some survival instinct in you reaches for the merest thing that once felt like safety. Even if it never really was, and never dialed, I'd just stare at her contact and then close the phone and get back to work. But it worked. Slowly, painfully, unglamorously, it worked. By 24, the company had real revenue. By 25, I had a team of 4. By 26, we landed a contract with a major logistics company that changed everything. Suddenly, the revenue wasn't just comfortable, it was serious. During all this time, I barely spoke to my family. My mom called once a year on my birthday, and the conversation always felt like she was checking a box. She'd asked if I was still doing the computer thing, and I'd say yes, and she'd sigh like I'd told her I was still trying to make it as a street magician. My sister never called at all. I didn't tell them anything. Not about the company, not about the growth, not about the office space I rented, then the bigger one I moved into. Not about the 12 employees, then 20, then 35. Not about the day I got an acquisition offer that I turned down because I wasn't done yet. I kept my social media clean. No flashy posts. No LinkedIn humble brags. I'm not built like that. I just worked. By 28, I bought the Penthouse. It wasn't something I planned. I was looking at apartments closer to the new office, and the realtor showed it to me almost as a joke. Top floor of a building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A terrace that looked out over the skyline. And right there, about 6 blocks south, visible from the living room, was my office building. My company's name on the side. I stood in that empty penthouse and looked out at it, and for the first time in years, I thought about my mom's kitchen. The garlic, the humming fridge, the way she said, "Be realistic." I bought it that week. Cash. Now here's where the revenge part comes in, and I know some of you might judge me for it, but I've earned the right to be petty. I spent 7 years building something out of nothing, while my family treated me like I was nothing. I waited for the right moment. It came when I turned 29. I decided to throw a housewarming party, 7 years late, sure, but the timing felt right. I invited friends, colleagues, a few clients, and then I called my mom. She sounded surprised to hear from me. I kept it casual. I told her I was having a little get-together at my place, and I'd love for her and my sister to come. She asked where I was living these days, and I just gave her the address and told her the date. She said she'd check with my sister and get back to me. 2 days later, she called back and said they'd come. She sounded almost suspicious, like she was trying to figure out the catch. The night of the party, I made sure everything was perfect. Catered food, a bartender, music. The place was full, maybe 40 people, all of them connected to my world. My lead developer was there, my operations manager, 2 of my biggest clients. People who respected me. People who knew what I built. I stood by the window with a drink and waited. They showed up about an hour in. I'd left their names with the doorman. I watched the elevator numbers climb, and when the doors opened, I saw my mom first. She was wearing a nice dress, the kind she used to wear to my sister's award ceremonies. My sister was behind her, looking around the lobby like she was in the wrong building. The doorman directed them up. When they walked into the penthouse, my mom stopped in the doorway. I mean physically stopped, one hand still on the doorframe. My sister nearly bumped into her. I watched from across the room, as their eyes moved. The high ceilings, the art on the walls, the catered spread, the people in nice clothes holding cocktails and laughing. I could see it on their faces, the confusion, the recalculation, the slow dawning understanding that this wasn't a modest apartment with a folding table and paper plates. This was someone's real life. And that someone was me. I walked over and greeted them warmly, gave my mom a hug, told my sister it was good to see her. I was polite. I was gracious. That was important to me. I didn't want to be cruel. I wanted them to see. My mom asked me whose place this was, and I told her it was mine. She laughed, a short nervous sound, and asked if I was renting. I told her no. I owned it. She looked at me like I'd spoken in a language she didn't understand. I gave them a tour, showed them the kitchen, professional grade, Marble countertops, the works, and then I brought them to the living room windows and pointed south. I told them to look at the building with the blue logo. I told them that was my company. I told them I built it from nothing, no degree, no inheritance, no college fund. I told them it employed over 40 people now, and had been valued at a number I never imagined, when I was eating rice and eggs in a studio apartment. I said it all calmly, no venom, no shouting. My mom didn't say anything for a long time. She just stood there, looking out the window, and I could see her reflection in the glass. She looked smile. My sister, to her credit, tried to recover. She said it was impressive, and asked how I'd gotten started. I told her, briefly, without emotion, about the years of teaching myself to code, the freelancing, the grinding, the cold emails, the near failures. I didn't mention the college fund. The silence did the work for me. After a few minutes, my mom finally spoke. She said she was proud of me, and I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. I'd spent years imagining what I'd feel when she finally said those words, and the answer was empty. Not angry, not satisfied, just hollow. I thanked her politely, like she complimented my shoes. The rest of the party went on. My mom and sister stayed for about an hour. They were quiet, mostly watching, mostly listening. A few of my colleagues came up and introduced themselves, mentioned projects we'd done together, talked about the company like it was something real, because it was. At one point, my operations manager told my mom that I was the hardest working person she'd ever met, and my mom nodded and looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. 29 years. First time. When they left, my mom hugged me at the door. It lasted longer than usual. She told me again that she was proud, and this time her voice cracked slightly. I said thank you. I didn't say I forgive you. I didn't say I don't. I just said thank you, and watched them walk to the elevator. The door closed. I went back to the terrace with my drink, and looked out over the city. Update 1. 3 days later. So the party happened Saturday, and it's now Tuesday, and my phone has not stopped buzzing. My mom has called me 4 times. My sister has texted me twice, which is basically a record, since she's texted me maybe 5 times in the last 7 years. My mom's calls have been a mix of things. The first one was short. She said she had a wonderful time, and she couldn't believe how well I was doing. The second one, she got emotional. She started talking about how she always knew I had potential, and I actually had to put the phone away from my ear for a second, because the revisionism was so thick I could choke on it. She always knew? She literally told me to go work at a hardware store. The third call was the one that got to me. She brought up my dad. She said he would have been so proud, and she wished he could have seen what I'd built. That one hurt. Because she was right. He would have been proud. He was the one who set up those college funds. He was the one who believed in both of his kids equally, and she took his money and funneled every cent of it into one child. I didn't say that. I just said, yeah, I wish he could have seen it too, and I changed the subject. My sister's texts were different. The first was casual. Hey, it was really great seeing your place. We should catch up more. The second one, sent about 6 hours later, was longer. She said she'd been thinking a lot since the party, and she realized she'd never really asked about my life or what I was doing, and she was sorry about that. She did not mention the college fund. She did not mention the house that was bought with my money. I haven't responded yet. Update 2. 2 weeks later. Okay, so this escalated. After I posted the first update, a lot of people told me I should have a real conversation with my mom about the money. I wasn't planning to, but then something happened that forced my hand. My sister called me, actually called, not texted, and asked if I'd be interested in investing in a business she was starting. She said she'd been wanting to branch out on her own. She had a great idea, and she figured, since I'd done so well, maybe I could help her get off the ground. She was asking me for money. 2 weeks after seeing my penthouse. Let me be clear, she wasn't asking for a loan. She was asking for an investment, with vague terms, no business plan, and the unspoken assumption that family meant I owed her something. Something inside me just snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. It was more like a wire that had been holding everything together for years, just quietly gave out. I told her no, plainly, directly. I told her that I loved her but I wasn't going to fund her venture, and that if she was serious about starting a business, she should do what I did. Figure it out from zero with no safety net, no inheritance, no family fund to fall back on. There was a long silence. Then she said I was being harsh. I was being realistic. I used that word on purpose. I'm not going to pretend I didn't. She hung up. An hour later my mom called me upset, saying my sister was in tears, saying I'd been cold and dismissive. She said family helps family, and I should be grateful for what I have and share it. And that's when I finally said it, all of it. I told her that she took $40,000 that my dead father saved for my education and gave it to my sister for a house. I told her she looked me in the eye at 18 years old, in that kitchen that smelled like garlic, while the fridge hummed behind her, and told me to be realistic. I told her she never once asked about my work, my company, my life, for 7 years. Not once. Not when I was sleeping on a couch. Not when I was eating gas station food. Not when I was building something from absolutely nothing, with nobody behind me. And now, 2 weeks after seeing the result of everything I built alone, the very first instinct, is to ask me to fund my sister again. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. I told her I'd made peace with it years ago, in the way you make peace with a scar. It's always there, but it stops bleeding eventually. But I was not going to pretend it didn't happen. My mom got very quiet. Then she said something that actually surprised me. She said she knew. She said she'd known for years that what she did was wrong, and she didn't know how to bring it up, so she just didn't. She said losing my dad broke something in her, and she clung to my sister because my sister reminded her of him. The academic achievements, the clear path. And she didn't know what to do with me because I was different. It wasn't an excuse, but it was honest. First honest thing she'd said to me in years. I told her I appreciated her saying that. I told her I didn't need an apology, but I needed her to understand that I will never forget what it felt like to be the kid whose own mother didn't believe in him. I told her that I built everything I have on the back of that pain, and while I'm proud of what I've accomplished, I wish I hadn't needed spite as fuel. We sat in silence for what felt like minutes. Then she said she loved me, and for the first time in a long time, I actually believed her. Update 3 1 month later, my sister eventually apologized. Not just for asking me for money, but for the years of silence, the years of going along with the way things were. She admitted she always knew the dynamic was unfair, but it benefited her, so she never questioned it. That took guts to say, and I respected it. We're not close. I don't think we'll ever be close in the way some siblings are. Too much time, too much distance, too much unsaid that finally got said, but we talk now, once a week or so. She sends me articles she thinks I'd like. I send her terrible memes. It's small, but it's real. My mom and I are in a different place. We had dinner last week, just the two of us, at a quiet restaurant. She asked me about the company, about my team, about what I was building next. She actually listened. She asked follow-up questions. She didn't compare me to my sister once. At the end of the dinner, she told me something that broke me open a little. She said that the night of the party, when she stood in my penthouse looking out at the city, she realized that the child she'd written off had become the person she wished she'd been brave enough to be. She said watching me succeed without her help was the proudest and most ashamed she'd ever felt at the same time. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just reached across the table and held her hand for a second. We didn't need to say anything else. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm not writing it to brag. I don't need anyone to tell me I made it. I already know. I'm writing it because I know there's someone out there right now sitting in their childhood bedroom, being told they're not smart enough, not good enough, not worth the investment. Someone whose parent looked at them and decided they were the lesser child. Someone who is burning with something they can't name yet, and every adult around them is trying to put that fire out. I want that person to know, the people who count you out don't get to decide your ceiling. Only you do. Their opinion of you is not your future. It's just noise. Build it, angry if you have to. Build it tired. Build it broken. Build it on the floor of a studio apartment at 3 a.m. when the world is asleep and no one believes in you. Build it anyway, because 7 years from now, you might be standing in a penthouse, looking out at a skyline, holding a drink, watching the sunset bounce off a building with your name on it. And the people who didn't believe in you will be standing right behind you, seeing it too. And they'll finally understand what they missed. And that quiet, undeniable, unhurried proof is the only revenge that actually matters. It doesn't taste sweet. It doesn't taste bitter. It just tastes like yours.